people talk about if the numbers work, do it. The numbers have to work. I agree. But real estate is not a numbers game. It's not a numbers business. It's a people business.
Oh boy, you're speaking my language.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, the numbers need to work. But if you're not aware of those relationships and don't pay attention to that, you're not going to have a blissful time.
Welcome to Racking Up Rentals, a show about how regular people, those of us without huge war chests of capital or insider connections, can build lasting wealth acquiring a portfolio of buy and hold real estate. But we don't just go mainstream looking at what's on the market and asking banks for loans, nor are we posting "we buy houses" signs or just looking for, quote, motivated sellers to make lowball offers to. You see, we are people-oriented deal makers. We sit down directly with sellers to work out win-win deals without agents or any other obstacles and buy properties nobody else even knows are for sale. I'm Jeff from The Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur. If you're the kind of real estate investor who wants long-term wealth, not get-rich-quick gimmicks or pictures of yourself holding fat checks on social media, this show is for you. Join me and quietly become the wealthiest person on your block. Now let's go rack up a rental portfolio.
Hey there, thank you for joining me for another episode of Racking Up Rentals. And today I've got an awesome interview to share with you. So before we get to the interview, this is episode number 51, which means that our show notes are at www.thoughtfulre.com/E51. Before we get started, please do us a big favor, and it does you a big favor too, by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app. It really does help fellow thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs who are looking for a group like this to find us and join the conversation. All right, onward with today's episode. So in today's episode, I've had the absolute honor, privilege, and super enjoyable experience of interviewing Moneeka Sawyer. So Moneeka is known as the Blissful real estate investor, and you're going to see why real quickly. Her enthusiasm and her attitude and everything about her is just absolutely infectious. And I don't know about you, but I could use all of those doses of good, positive energy that I can possibly get. And Moneeka is also the host of the Real Estate Investing for Women podcast, which is a very highly rated podcast. She's got all sorts of excellent guests. And in this conversation, she and I talk about a wide variety of things from real estate investing and strategy and approaches and marketing, all the way to what it means to be blissful and how you can do it yourself. So I won't keep you from the interview any longer. Let's dive right into this, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Okay, Moneeka, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to Racking Up Rentals.
Yay! Thank you, Jeff, for having me. I can't wait for this conversation. It's really, I don't see very many people out there talking about being thoughtful. I mean, there are a lot of thoughtful people, but what a great title. I love that. Thank
you. Well, we have something in common. Our titles both end in FUL. And so let's start with yours first. So you're known as the blissful person. Talk to us about, what does that mean to be blissful? How did you come up with that?
Yeah. So actually, I'm called the Blissful Millionaire, which I love. That was coined on television years ago. I just love it. So my whole thing is about bliss. And so before we talk about any other things about like real estate, let me just define bliss. So bliss to me is a deep sense of joy and contentment and the confidence that you can handle anything that comes your way. So it's really about emotional mastery and emotional resilience. And the reason that I have married it with real estate is because real estate is my industry passion, right?
Yeah.
But helping people to achieve bliss in their lives is my heart passion. So I've married the two. And I read a quote once by Warren Buffett that said, if you can't control your emotions, you can't control your money. So I think that emotions have a very special place in our life. Like they teach us so much about who we are and what's happening. So we have a right to those emotions. But it's also very important that we can manage those emotions so that we can be successful in whatever business we're looking at. And real estate is no exception.
Yeah. Wow. I really love the definition. The joy and contentment part, I probably expected to be part of that definition, but the confidence to handle things, that is, wow, so important in all form. I mean, in life, of course, in general, but especially entrepreneurship, whether it's real estate or anything else, there's always stuff coming at us. And if we can't stay level, I mean, that's sort of the words I've used in the past is how do I stay level and not be just volatile up and down all the time? So I love that that's part of the definition of bliss.
Yeah, I think that, and I love that you approach investing as an entrepreneurship mindset, because I feel very much the same way. The way that our mind works when we're looking at an investment is very different than when we're looking at it as a business. And I think, like you say, in business, we have to wear lots of different hats, and we never know what's going to happen tomorrow or in the next hour, right? Like, so you have to be able to be really resourceful. And part of that resourcefulness has to do with how well you manage flexibility, change, things going wrong. Your emotions is such a big piece of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you become the Queen of Bliss? Was this, were you this way at birth? Did you?
I wish. My mom is probably my biggest mentor in Bliss. She's one of the most beautifully joyful people I've ever met, sort of against the odds. But I think my journey in her was very similar. She wanted to be a doctor. She grew up in old Pakistan before it was India. So there was a lot of rules for women that she had to kind of bust through. And in my own life, when they came to the United States, so I was born here, but we lived, and please forgive me if this sounds weird, but we lived in a very white community, and I'm very obviously not white. Well, for anybody who can't see me, I'm Indian. But so I was bullied. Like, a lot of people get bullied, right? But that was my thing, is I was getting really badly bullied and just tormented and humiliated constantly. And so I learned at a very young age that I was going to be alone, people weren't going to like me, and that if I wanted to be happy, it was up to me. And so that journey started at a very young age. And so I have been on that journey personally to stay blissful my entire life. And when I felt like I had gotten to that place where I was there, like, I will never say I'm completely blissful. I believe that I will always be improving my bliss and being more blissful, right? It's a forever journey.
Yeah.
But I did get to a place where I felt like, wow, this is so good. Life is so good. And I've been through some stuff, right? I mean, I don't know if you know any of this, but I was in a car accident where I was crippled. I've been sexually assaulted a couple times. I mean, there's some stuff, and this maybe not be the place to talk about it, but seriously, there's been some stuff. And to be able to get through it and to develop those skills, my heart goes out to people that are not blissful or not living the life that they deserve and crave. And so I wanted to share that message with people. So that became like my life message. How can I help everybody experience this?
Wow. So now I came across you through Bliss manifesting in the form of a podcast, right?
Yes.
But as I recall, right as I met you and we were messaging back and forth, you said, I've been very busy. I just launched a book, and I've got another one coming out. And once I looked it up, you're a multi-time author, right? Tell us about your books.
Yeah. So the first one is Choose Bliss. So I became a coach, a bliss coach in the Silicon Valley, where I was coaching in companies that you now know as multi-billion-dollar companies. I was coaching their CEOs and executives in the very early years. Wow. And one of the things that would happen with an executive is they would have the perfect life, right? They have this amazing company and amazing spouse and all of those things. And at some point they would think, really, is this it? And they would realize that they're not happy. And so I would go in with my strategies and teach them how to be happy again. But happy is a little bit more superficial than what I was going for. I wanted something that would be more driving, because that's what these people needed, right? And so that's why I started to go for this deeper level of bliss. So after being a coach for a while, I sort of realized there's only so many people I can reach as a coach. And even on stage, the book can and has reached millions. And so that's why I wrote Choose Bliss. It's with the strategies that worked really consistently with my clients and with myself. And then as I got more into real estate, I wrote a couple of other real estate books. They've all been #1 international bestsellers, which I'm so blessed. I feel so grateful for that. But yeah, so a couple are about blissful real estate, and one is the original sort of my message to the world, which was Choose Bliss, because it's a choice.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And just that message that it's a choice is it's so important. And we can't remind ourselves of that often enough, really. I think I need to work that into my morning routine of journaling and all that other stuff to remind myself that bliss is a choice.
It really is. You talk so much about mindfulness, right? We can't control what happens outside of us, right? But we must control what happens inside of us. What's going on in our mind? What's going on in our heart?
Yeah.
Right? How are we taking care of our bodies? We're our souls, right? We're complete people. And we are responsible for how we take care of ourselves.
Yeah. And boy, oh boy, 2020 has sure given us a lot of opportunities to remember that, right? That we can't control everything that's going on around us, but we certainly can direct our energies towards controlling our own reactions and our own state and all of that. So that's such an important reminder.
Yeah. It's so funny because people are always, now I get a lot of messages like, how do you be blissful? How do you be blissful? It's easy when things are fine. Yeah. This really showed us what we were made of. And what I love about that is people being very aware of, oh, I don't have this under control yet. Maybe I should develop some skills around this because it's been hard. Things have been hard for a lot of people, myself included. But I've got strategies that I can rely on for dealing with my real estate business, dealing with my life, dealing with the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into your life as an actual real estate entrepreneur yourself. And, I know that you've got a really cool and unique kind of little niche of the world. But if I understand correctly, you, like the rest of our listeners, are really focused on long-term wealth and hold properties. Is that right?
That's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your unique little corner of the industry.
Okay. So I do executive homes. And the reason I got into executive homes is so I'm all about bliss. I want my business to be really supportive of my joy. There's so many people that are like, when I get to $10 million, I will be happy, right? But the thing is that when you get to $10 million, you are who you were, right inside. If you're happy when you're poor, you'll be happy when you're rich.
Yeah.
If you're miserable and mean when you're poor, you'll be miserable and mean when you're rich, right? So the person that you are through that whole journey is so important to making the journey feel meaningful and making the result really fill you up the way that you want it to, right?
Yeah.
So that's really, so bliss is that big piece for me. So for me, what's going to make me blissful? So I kind of did this backwards. Who is it that I want to do business with that will make my business blissful? Now, your tenant, if you self-manage your properties, so your tenant, or if you don't, if you have a management company, they will be the people that determine your bliss or not. Those people are your business partners. So for me, it's my tenants. Who is it that I want as a business partner? So I chose them first. I want people that are not going to call me for every little thing in the house, that like autonomy, that like a nice home. So, executives, for instance, entertain quite a lot of their homes, right? So they want a really nice home. So they're going to upkeep it the way that I would want to upkeep it. So I made choices based on who I want to do business with. And then I started to find homes that person would want to live in. And so that's kind of how I chose to go the executive route, is because I knew, first of all, I had been a coach for executives for a long time. So I already had a really good feeling for who they are, how to work with them, what I loved about them, what I didn't, like what to watch out for, right? And I could fulfill their expectations really easily, just kind of naturally, right? So it made sense for me. Now, that's not going to be true for everybody, but I think that the most important thing in creating a blissful business is to know who you want to be doing business with.
Yeah. Oh, I love that on so many levels. I was just thinking, at the beginning of our conversation, I don't know how to, it's not really a question, so I don't feel like I should ask this question. But in my mind is this concept of, I'm so excited to explore the intersection of blissful and thoughtful. And because I know there's so much there, but it's a little bit of a touchy-feely, kind of a squishy topic, right? and you just gave me such a great a little epiphany there, because we're unbelievably intentional about deciding what you wanted and then kind of reverse engineering from that. And I think that intentionality, the being deliberate, is a very important part of what we do as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. We're not just out flailing around, grabbing onto any way of making money possible. We're really trying to just be very, very intentional. It goes back to the mindfulness thing, like you mentioned. So that process of determining your blissful client and then kind of working backwards from there is a great example of that.
Exactly. And, so my dad, so I'm a legacy real estate investor, and my dad invested for years. So I've been in the real estate world for a long time. And my dad didn't do that. He came from a country where, they had $200 in their pockets when they came. My parents were arranged marriage newlyweds when they came. So they didn't even really have a relationship that they knew each other very well. And they come here and they want to start buying real estate because that's the way you make money in the United States, which is what everybody all over the world knows, right? And in America, we don't appreciate it enough. I'm just saying. But they come here and they're like, we're going to work hard. And so they did. The toilets and the termites and the phone calls at 2:00 in the morning and the mortgages and with the renters not paying. But, they had all this stuff. And so by the time I got to be old enough to start investing, I'm like, no way. Are you kidding? That looks miserable. Right? Yeah. And so when I finally decided to move into real estate, I knew, first of all, it was going to be the long game. That's what I had learned from my dad, right? If it was going to be the long game, it was not going to be miserable. It was going to support the joy in my life. It had to be that way,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then I guess also on the note of intentionality, as I've read some of your materials before, I know that you have got pretty specific parameters, criteria, things like that for how you evaluate potential deals and acquisitions and things like that. Can you tell us just a little bit about what are some of your hard and fast rules, some of the rules that maybe there's a little bit of flex, but what you're looking for, before it enters your world? Tell us about that lens that you look at everything through.
Yeah. So for me, it's all about location. So, and I know that sounds so trite, forgive me, but I'm trying to fill my houses with executives. So they're going to want a big, beautiful home in a big, beautiful neighborhood with probably a nice garage for their nice cars, right? So there's a particular kind of look that I'm looking for in a home. Now, what's also interesting is I often will go into a redevelopment area. I like going in and buying a house that has had some trouble and making it blissful again and then moving somebody into there. In 2009, 2010, I went into a lot of these, what you might call A-class neighborhoods, and noticed the struggle that had happened there and started buying those houses. So I'm able to, for me, so much of it is giving back, right? Like I was able to uplift those neighborhoods, uplift those communities, also provide beautiful homes for the kind of tenant that I wanted to provide for. So it's really location, but location is where would they want to live? What are the kinds of houses they would want to live in? But also, how can I uplift a neighborhood or a community by doing what I do?
Yeah. I'm really glad you bring that up. And it's funny, you say, oh, location, that sounds so trite. And everybody uses the word location a lot when they talk about real estate. But in my experience, especially recently, I feel like there's so many voices who are out there talking about, and while I disagree with them, these are voices I like and respect, but they're talking about, where I live is different than where I invest, and out of state and out of market. And if the numbers make sense, it doesn't matter. I've never even been to this town, virtual this, I'm doing everything by text. And I completely disagree with that. And I am so much more in the philosophy that you just expressed too. Because I think there's a massive correlation between location and market resilience and tenant quality and all the downstream effects of all of those things. And I think about macro location in terms of like, well, maybe what state or what city am I in? But even there's micro location too. Which lot on the block is this home? Is it the one on the corner? Is it the one in the middle? Is it the one that's adjacent to the commercial zoning? All of those things. And I don't think that, location is location, that's what people say, but I don't actually think it is respected quite as much as what you just described. And that really resonates with me and our approach here too.
I love that. And I think, gosh, you make such good points. Like location can be very micro, like in a neighborhood. For instance, I always tell people never be the nicest home on a block. So even if I go into a redevelopment area and I'm building something, I don't build it to be the nicest, not building, but refurbing something. I don't build it to be the very nicest in the block. I've got my standards of what it needs to look like, and I want to provide something absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to overbuild and overspend, right? So even to that degree, like in the location, are there houses around you that will pull you up? Right. So
Absolutely.
location has so many different pieces to it. And I think you're right. I don't know. People talk about if the numbers work, do it. The numbers have to work. I agree. But real estate is not a numbers game. It's not a numbers business. It's a people business.
Oh boy, you're speaking my language.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, the numbers need to work. But if you're not aware of those relationships and don't pay attention to that, you're not going to have a blissful time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
oh gosh, I absolutely love that. I was thinking I need to create some kind of I don't know if it's a graphic or something, but when I'm on social media and I see, in Facebook groups and stuff, people always post these questions that are something like, I've got this potential deal. Here's the price. Here's the ARV. Here's the repairs. Should I do it? And I always want to say, you've given us about 5% of the information we need. And of that remaining missing 95%, about 80 of those percentage points have nothing to do with the property, and it's everything to do with the people. And so I love the way that you describe that. And so that leads me into wondering, what is your kind of approach to acquisition, or your own lead generation efforts and your approach to, stirring up opportunity and then negotiating it and getting it closed and all of that?
Okay, so you may actually hate this answer. I do nothing. I have an agent.
Okay.
And so when I'm ready to purchase, I call my agent. He's been working for me for 15 years. We start looking at houses and having nice lunches. And I probably, for every purchase, make about 30 offers. So, I'll probably only buy one property a year. But we make a bunch of offers at the price that I am willing to pay. And eventually I will get a property in the location that I like at the price that I want that will rent out. In California, this is amazing, but I pretty much always at least cut even.
Yeah.
Even on the front end. That's important to me, right? So I just have my team, they manage the process for me, and I kind of go along for the very fun ride.
Yeah. So then for you, the people side of it is the relationship with your team members and your agent, right? And everybody else who might make that up, but then also your tenant, right? Because they were the ones you had right. Your mind kind of focused on them in the first place. So that's how that manifests for you then?
Exactly. And, every once in a while, my agent, like I said, he's known me for a very long time. I remember I was traveling to Thailand with my husband, and he sent me something in my email. And I don't check email when I'm traveling. When I'm on vacation, I'm on vacation. And he texted me, which I was surprised that I got in Thailand, whatever. And so he texted me and he goes, I found this house. I think you'll like it. And there's going to be multiple offers on it. And my first thing was, if there's going to be multiple offers, I won't get it. And he goes, no, it's really underpriced. They're motivated, blah, blah, blah. So I had him offer on it. He got it while I was in Thailand. And so, but I made sure he had the contingencies written up so that I could actually look at it. Right. Yeah. But I trust him. He knows me. He's been doing business with me for a long time, and he knows the kind of tenant that I'm interested in putting in those houses.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. That's great. Well, I would just say, if you ever wanted to, I think I could see you being insanely good at walking into somebody's living room and having a conversation about buying their piece of real estate.
Yeah. I've actually tried it. And anybody who's listening, here's the thing. You have to really know what your commitment level is. Like any business that you're doing, know how much you're willing to put into it. Here's the truth about me. I could retire today. I set it up that way. I made it long before I expected to. It's awesome. So now what I do is I do it because I want to give back to the world, because I feel like I've been so blessed, right? So I do this because it's fun. I want to make thousands of women millionaires, and anybody who's listening, right? Like, get into real estate, you'll be a millionaire. I want that to happen for people. But I don't have to work very hard for my own real estate success because I'm already there. So I'm not highly motivated to go knocking on doors, right?
Yeah.
So is that bad? Maybe, but this is another tenet of Bliss. Know what's enough. Like, am I willing to work that hard for the next level? Not really. If I was, then I would, right? Yeah. So when's enough? What's Bliss really for you? It doesn't mean $100 million. I'm happy with where I'm at. And of course it has to grow, and, there's inflation. So it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm just not going to do anything. It's not that. But I do know how much I'm willing to work on my business, and I do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I think one of the hardest things for new investors, thinking back to when I was that, and then just observing other people who I get to work with now, it's sort of finding your voice. This is how I would say it: finding your voice as an investor, which is, to me, finding. There's a million angles, and flavors, and everything within real estate. So finding the ones that resonate with you, and finding the ones where there's an alignment between how you think, your talents, how you like to spend your time, how, just all of those things, just finding the right configuration. It's like, I don't know, tailoring, I think, everybody's, body shape is a little bit different. And so if you can get in there and just tailor just the right approach to fit you, then I think that probably facilitates Bliss a lot better than trying to force it. I think when you're a newbie, you're learning everything, but you're actually hearing, you're hearing this voice and this perspective over here, and then you're hearing this one, and you're like, wow, I don't understand how those relate to each other. There's a little conflict. It takes a little time to find just the right recipe for you, I think.
Absolutely. Jeff, I feel like you're my doppelganger. It's so true, because I always tell people there's a million ways to make $1 million in real estate, right? My buy and hold strategy is different than your buy and hold strategy, even like to that level, right?
Yeah.
So you really need to understand your why. So for me, I had a why. I reached that why. It doesn't mean that I'm not motivated, but it does mean that I can say, okay, what's my next level, and how hard do I have to work for that, right? So what's your why? What are your resources? And in your resources, it's your emotions too. Like, what's your aversion to risk? How do you deal with challenges, right? Those emotional resources are also really important. What are your strengths? And here's the other thing: focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. If you hate numbers, don't make yourself the number person in your company. The numbers have to work. You can use a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Right? Someone else can watch the other numbers, right? So, but like for me, I'm a people person. I really love the relationship. Some people are all about design. So really, what are your strengths? Build a business based on your strengths, not on learning and improving your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And then other resources, pretty obvious: money, right? And then how about time? Time per week, per month, but also time frame to reach your goals. Do you have 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What do you got? And how much time each month do you want to spend? All of those things put together help you to design. If you want to spend, like me, 10 hours a month, you're not going to flip houses.
Yeah, no.
You're not going to go door knocking, right? So that's how I've designed my business. And I find that it's so much more stable. I'm so much more capable of staying motivated because it's really designed based on who I am rather than someone else's good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So well said. So you are very focused as a real estate educator on educating women specifically, right? Mm-hmm. And that's even the name of your podcast, right? We just make sure we all know what that is.
Real estate investing for women.
All right, awesome. So how did you, when you were, deciding that you were going to start your podcast and really start putting yourself out there in the real estate education specifically, what were some of the things that made you say, I really want to focus on women specifically?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little story real quick. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. When I was 16, I was a foreign exchange student in India. So I was born here in the United States. I went to India. And one of the things that struck me was how horribly women were treated there. Domestic violence is normal, not even talked about because it's considered normal. Women don't get educations. there's this thing in India called sati, where a husband dies and the woman is supposed to jump onto the cremation fire and burn to her death. There's horrible things that happen to women in India. And I was so traumatized and so horrified that I thought, this is not going to be my plight for sure. But is there anything that I can do? And I started to find out about public education or any education. And public education in India is not what you think it is. It's horrible. And women are usually, or girls are not usually allowed to go to school. They're trained to be wives, and they're often married off very young, 7, 10, 12, 16. Things are changing. So this was 30 years ago, just for context. So things are changing. But in those days, that's what I saw. And so I started at the age of 16, donating like $5 a month to a school that gave scholarships to girls to go to school. Then fast forward, right? So this is my passion, is really helping women just from a very young age. Now, fast forward, I get out of school, it's out of college, and it's a recession, and I can't find a job. And my mom and dad are wanting to marry me off. They wanted to have an arranged marriage. Oh my God, could you even imagine? They wanted to marry me off. This is how they talk about it. And I'm like, ah! So I determined I was never going to be married off. I would choose who I married, when, and why. And the only way that I could see that I was going to be able to do that was to be able to be financially independent. Because if I'm financially independent, I get to make my choices. I can pay my own bills. I can live my own life, and I don't need some man to take care of me. Now, don't get me wrong. I love men. I love my husband, right? But I knew that if I could not be financially independent, I was going to be at the mercy of somebody else's whims or ideas. And so real estate was what I chose because that's what I knew. That's what my dad had taught me. And it was a path that I chose. Now, fast forward again, my book comes out, Choose Bliss. I travel the entire country. 150 people have seen me. I get so many emails. And the one email that I get more than anything else is, Moneeka, how can you be blissful when you're completely broke? You can't feed your children. And one of the things that I realized then was I took care of that money thing when I was 25. And it made my whole life possible. And so that's why I wanted to now empower people, marrying my two favorite industries, right? My heart work. I wanted to marry those and create that ability for other women to have freedom, to make choices, not based on fear, but based on what they really want for themselves and their children and their families. So that's why I'm so focused. This focus on women started when I was very, very young.
Wow. Talk about a why, right? I mean, I'm sure when you get up, you're like, boy, I've got a lot to do today. Maybe don't feel motivated. That's a why that's going to pull you forward and keep you going. That's
Absolutely.
amazing. Yeah. So let's talk about women as real estate investors. Do you think, are there any things that women are particularly well suited for in real estate? Maybe even more so or differently than men?
So I think the way that we do real estate is completely different than men, and I think it should be. I always tell women, because they're like, it's a man's world, and you see women trying to be men, and so I'll say to them, you'll never be as good at being a man as a man will, and a man will never be as good at being a woman as you are, and so choose your strengths. Choose to run your business based on your strengths. So what are some of the things that women do really, really well? We're really good at creating a home and a nest. We're very intuitive about people. Now, you always vet your tenants and your vendors, but your intuition needs to be a piece of that decision process, and a big piece, because a lot of times people check out, and if you check out well, but if your gut or your heart is saying, I'm not sure, you follow that. Because if you don't, you find that you've made mistakes, right? It's something that we just have. We're really good with design, We're good with kind of getting a feel of the energy of a neighborhood, right? Those are some things that we do really, really well. We're really good at building relationships with our team, So there's a lot of things that we do really, really, really well. Now, the masculine has to be there. We have to know our numbers. We're running a business. This is not a hobby. If you really ever want it to be successful, it has to be treated like a business. And so that's when you plug into your masculine side. And here is this huge advantage that women have. Us women are all brought up in a very male-dominated world, right? We are taught from very young all the things that men consider important, and we're taught how to fit in. We have access to all of those skills and all of that lifelong learning. Men inherently have it. We learn it, right? But we inherently have the feminine. Men never get the opportunity to learn the feminine. Mm. They really only have access to that masculine side unless they've paid really good attention to developing the feminine. But the women get it by default because that's what society demands. So if you can plug into the masculine that you know and plug into the feminine that's your default and your true resource, you can do so much more than what a man really has access to. So those women that are like, it's a male-dominated world and they resent it, oh my gosh, what a gift. Like, what a gift we got. I mean, okay, so I don't want it to be totally male-dominated. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that we can look at this as a gift, right? We can choose to use those resources to better our own lives and the lives of the people we love.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. And, you know, I was telling you before we hit record, when I think about what we do as what I call thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs, and our approach to acquisition of being very direct to seller, very, very relational, very sit in the living room. And if it takes 12 meetings in the living room over the course of 6 months, who cares? So be it. That's how this is going. Mm-hmm. When I think about that process, and I realize these are, you know, generalizations, but I feel like women are so well suited to that type of an environment. Whether it's asking good questions or listening or intuiting, like reading between the lines, maybe what the seller's talking about, mm-hmm. that they really want to accomplish. And so I think it's a great fit, you know, if the people are interested in doing that type of acquisition, right? Where you're out talking to people face to face. But I just think they're so really well suited for that. So yeah. I'm excited to see more women, I mean, get into real estate investing as a whole, but, you know, especially even like my, just the community I'm trying to build and the message I'm trying to, you know, put out there too. So why do you think there aren't more women already involved in real estate investing?
Yeah. So I actually just did some research and I found that so out of the entire pool of real estate investors, women only make up about 30%. So that's a lot higher actually than it has been in the past. So we're definitely moving towards this sort of consciousness of wealth for ourselves. So yay, ladies.
Yeah.
But I think that we still don't have the confidence that men often have. And a lot of that has to do with the conversations we're having. So we don't have the mentorship. You know, there's a lot of men out there mentoring, and their languaging and their perspective is very different than the experience that a woman will have. So for instance, when we talk about the numbers have to work, you can buy in a C-class neighborhood. I would never buy in a C-class neighborhood. If I can't go and collect that rent without being afraid of being taken down, I will not walk into that neighborhood, and I am not going to buy that property. But a man's never going to think about that. He might, but it's not in his heart. And the money will override that because men don't walk around with the same issues that we walk around with, right? Or, you know, women go through menopause. We have children. We do these things that are going to affect our business. And as much as men may love us, like our men are our allies, right? My husband is the best in the world at being my ally, but he's not in my body. He doesn't understand me. And he doesn't understand the way that, you know, whatever might affect my mind or like, you know, emotional things with my emotions, right? Those sorts of things. I've got my skills, but, you know, so we deal with different things. And so having those conversations, we're just not getting it. We're made to feel wrong if we have an emotional reaction. There's a lot of that stuff, right? So there's not mentorship that really understands us. And there's not networks. We don't have access to all the different kinds of funding because we're not having the conversations or getting referrals for a property that's off market because we don't have the network. We don't have access to the community as much as men do. Now that's changing. I'm a part of that movement, and I know a lot of powerful women who are, but it's a new thing. It's new to acknowledge that we're different, that we're not just men dressed in dresses. We are different. We're just different. And we have different reasons for what we're doing, right? Yeah. Like we care a lot more about community, I think. That's not always true. Again, a gross generalization. But I do think that women care a lot about the communities they go into. They care a lot about the neighbors while they're actually doing construction, So I just think we just don't have the mentorship that understands kind of the way that and not all women are the same, but there are some things that are the same that we all go through. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it does. I think it absolutely does. So on your podcast, you do a lot of interviews, and I think, I'm experiencing this right now, but one of the great things about doing interviews is you get to talk to so many awesome and interesting people and learn things from them. So I was curious as I was, looking back through all the different folks that you've had on your show and some of the interviews I've listened to of all these things. Can you tell us like one maybe lesson that you learned from one of your guests that really struck you? Thought, wow, I've never thought about that before, or I've never seen it in that light. Mm-hmm. What's an interesting insight from a guest?
So, I'd like to actually go more general than that because I think I've had too many to share in a tiny little conversation. And what that really gives to me was the real reinforcement that you become who you hang out with. Mm. Now, the truth is that I get to hang out with people like you, Jeff. I get to hang out with these amazing people that are 10 times more successful than me. And the conversation you have with someone that's that much above you is going to be very, very different than the conversation you get to have with your peers. And it elevates your consciousness. It elevates the way you look at the world. And it gives you a perspective that you didn't even know you were missing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just every time I get off a podcast, I'm like, wow, like I'm just different. Like whether I like the strategy or not, whether that's something that's interesting to me or not, whether I even like the person, because there have been people on my show where I was like, I'm not sure how I felt about that person, but I'm always elevated. So I spend at least 2 hours a week with people that are significantly more successful than me in something. And it has made me a different person. And I have access to so much more resourcefulness inside of myself. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah. I think it's so, we live obviously these days, especially in such a work from home culture. And mm-hmm. It's easy. I find myself feeling kind of isolated sometimes,
Absolutely.
And to some degree, like ostensibly, if you ask me, like, how do I like my schedule to be? I would say I like to have white space in my calendar. I like to work alone. But the truth is then I don't always get that camaraderie and the challenge of new perspectives and different ideas and whatnot from people. And so I think that's a really, really important element. Sometimes I feel like if I go on Facebook and there are different Facebook groups, and some of them are especially for people who are new to real estate. And I think that that's very, very valuable in a certain way. But then on the other side of things, though, I kind of worry about it sometimes because I think, well, they're not surrounding themselves with people who are playing at a higher level right now. Mm-hmm. And so how do you get like the right mix of that? I think it's easier said than done, I think. Probably.
Yeah, it really, really is. And when you're getting started, you do need to kind of be in the weeds, right? You need to actually know what you're doing. And so you need that step by step. But always remember, like, you don't need to be talking to a billionaire in order to get started in real estate. But it is important that you can see a vision bigger than the weeds. You have to know how to get started, but you have to be able to see a vision that's bigger than that. Otherwise, you're not going to stay motivated. And it's those people that are past where you are. And I'm not talking about one step past. I hear this all the time. They just need to be, your mentor needs to just be one step beyond you. No, make sure they're 10. because they will demand of you and ask of you and share with you things that you can't really perceive, that will open your ability to make good decisions and be resourceful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. So a question as I start to wrap it up a little bit. There are probably people on any day of the year, but especially probably in this year, who are feeling like, I need to get a quick infusion of some bliss into my life. Do you have a tip or two for those of us who are like, okay, I'm a little low on the bliss scale right now, and I need to pick up my game. What can I do?
Yeah. I have a tip. It's called creating a bliss moment. And I use this all the time, whether it's in traffic, whether I heard something on the news that upset me, whether I got a call from a tenant that I'm not happy about, whatever. I use this tip. And so this is what you do. It's called stop, drop, and breathe. And so really what happens is when something starts to stress you out, it's not that thing usually. Bad things happen, okay? But normally it's really something happens and then you start to create something in your mind, some story in your mind about it. So someone cuts you off in traffic and you're like, I can't believe that. Like we get all riled up, right? One person can think that person jerk, blah, 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 blah. Another person might think, wow, that person must be having a bad day, right? I know what we naturally go to. But the point is, when that story starts happening, I stop. If it's causing me stress, I stop. So I'll actually say to myself, Moneeka, stop. You stop the thought. You do an interrupt. Then you drop out of your mind into your body, into your heart. Take a couple of deep breaths. Send that breath down through your feet. And suddenly you're grounded. And you're coming from your heart rather than from the ugly story you were making up. And now you can approach anything that's happening in a much more blissful, grounded way.
That's beautiful. I quite literally feel more grounded just listening to you describe that.
Yeah, me too. I love it.
Yeah.
And I use it all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, that is so, what a nice bow to put on things. I really, really, really appreciate that. I know all of our listeners will too. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who would like to learn a lot more about you and everything you do and all your awesome content. So where would you like to direct people? Where's the best place to find out more about you?
Yeah, come visit me at blissfulinvestor.com. Awesome. And I do have a free gift for them if they would like, and I'll leave it as a surprise. But blissfulinvestor.com. All
right. Well, you can't say no to that. Then that's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time to be with me. You said you used the word doppelganger earlier. It's so funny. I feel so much alignment in I don't know, just this spirit in the way that we're approaching real estate. And I would say I certainly aspire to approach all of life more and more like you. So thank you for being that person for me who's playing a big game and I get to hang out around.
I feel the same way, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me.
Hanging around Moneeka is like taking a huge breath of fresh air. She's so positive, and I hope you enjoyed listening to that interview as much as I did re-listening to it after we recorded it. So that's it for today's episode of Racking Up Rentals. And show notes for this episode, including a transcription of our conversation, are at thoughtfulre.com/E51. And again, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the show right now, just hit that subscribe button and even rate and review the show. I would be eternally grateful to you. Did you know also that we have a Facebook group for thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs? It's called Rental Portfolio Wealth Builders, and we would love to have you join us over there. So just go to group.thoughtfulre.com and it'll redirect you right into the group and you can hit that join button. If you liked this episode, and I hope you did, please take a screenshot of it. Post that screenshot to Instagram and tag us at Thoughtful Real Estate, all nice and spelled out. I will see you in the next episode. And until then, this is Jeff from the Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur signing off.
Thanks for listening to Racking Up Rentals, where we build long-term wealth by being win-win deal makers. Remember, solve the person to unlock the deal and solve the financing to unlock the profits.